Today is June 15th, and we are here with Peter Serventi of Serventi Ranch. Thanks for being here, Peter.
Good to meet with you.
Yeah, so first off, tell me about your farm. How long have you been here on Serventi Ranch? What do you grow? Where are we? How many people are involved in the operation? Just all that jazz. If you can give us a little summary about the ranch.
Yeah, so our ranch out here in Watsonville, right on the edge of Corralitos, is a 26-acre ranch. My wife and I purchased the property a little over 8 years ago. It was, when we arrived here, it was an aged apple orchard, trees well over 50 years, some 70, 80 years old. Had been replanted a few times in different spots. The oldest trees had not been, but on our hillside, there had been at least one round of replants. And it was a tired old orchard. Great place for birds, great habitat for birds, but not a productive orchard. Beautiful, beautiful ranch, great spot, great, very, very, very productive area in general, but the ranch itself was not so productive. So starting 8 years ago, slowly we've been taking the old orchard out. We've started to replant portions of it. We've got 4 acres of replanted apples that we're growing. We've mixed some of the varieties up. Before it was primarily Newtown Pippins, which is a very popular apple to be grown in this area for Martinelli's. Going into their juice, and we've got Mutsu's, Granny Smith, and a variety of various hard cider apples that we use for our own hard cider that we produce here, all organically farmed, which is something that we undertook on getting certified as soon as we acquired the ranch 8 years ago, and have maintained that certification ever since. Operation is very small, just myself and contract labor crews that come out at various peaks of the season, whether it's for pruning, for picking. Sometimes when we're going to plant a significant amount of trees, we'll bring some extra help out, but otherwise just me out tending the orchard. And we are in transition to planting more crops. We're going to be planting more perennials, more tree crops over time, not trying to do everything all at once, but over a longer period of time.
Sweet. Cool. Tell me why you decide to plant hedgerows on your property and what benefits you expect to get from them.
As I mentioned, when we got out here, it was an aging apple orchard. It had been historically farmed conventionally, and there was minus on the fringes of the property where we border a creek and have some oak trees going up their property line and up the road. There was nothing out here except for tilled soil with apples, and we wanted to make some changes. We wanted to bring beneficials into the property. The Healthy Soils program with its hedgerows has allowed us to bring native plants in it's really a win-win for multiple reasons. It's great for our apples. It can bring beneficials in, whether it's pollinators that can help in the spring, whether it's beneficial predators that can go after some of the pests that we experience. Those hedgerows can help us with that to the extent that they're along the edge of our orchards. But also a win for the environment in general, in that, one, it encourages native populations to thrive where they might not otherwise have homes. It can help sequester carbon just in the evergreens, constant plants, versus just bare tilled soil. It's to me a huge improvement, not only for our farm, but for the health of the planet.
Mm-hmm. How did you determine where on the farm to plant your hedgerows, and what factors went into this decision?
We put some thought into it. There's more to come in terms of where we're going to be putting hedgerows. We took locations at the moment that were the easiest to implement initially, and that was along roadways, along fence lines, the areas where we wouldn't have to worry about shoot, are we going to be trying to grow crops through here in the future? Are we going to be planting trees here? Spots that really, as they exist right now, just facilitated having a hedgerow. Along the roadways, it's nice because there's a barrier between our crops and the road. A barrier not only for the crops, but for the noise, for the pollution, for the dust that gets kicked up. So that was that. There's some aesthetic aspects to it, really just enhancing the beauty of the location and anyone that's just passing through, which even though we're a dead-end street, we get a fair amount of traffic coming through here, but really love to be able to provide that, just something that's more scenic for people that are passing through and driving by as they go to neighboring farms. It's location is really trying to tackle places that were easy to implement hedgerows at this stage. Down the road, as we replant more of the property, there will be places to plant that aren't just along roadways or fence lines, but are actually in the middle of the farm. But we're waiting until we get exact configurations for what we be planting our crops before we do that.
Cool. And could you tell me about your motivation for species selection? I know you have a bit of affinity towards manzanitas.
Yeah, we've got it's a very diverse mix.
Yeah.
Multiple varieties of manzanita, of ceanothus, some deer grass. We've got oak trees. We've got a few redwood trees, and so varying heights, and even within the manzanitas and the ceanothus, some are going to be taller, some are going to be shorter. Really, just that combination of one having a lot of diversity, we thought would be good, with our goals of providing habitats for predators. And for native, whether it's native birds, other native species that can help us. But that diversity, we thought would be beneficial. Having blooms at different times of the year. But as far as there's, for me, the aesthetics of it too, are something that I think about, and having that mix of heights and mix of foliage, mix of bark colors is, to me, just interesting and pleasing to look at. So that was more so the motivation. And in combination with having a diversity for different pollinators and different beneficials.
Cool. Well, the hedgerow, so far it looks great. It's going to grow into a really nice looking hedgerow with all those manzanitas. So I guess we can talk about the negatives in terms of planning the process, the costs that you've incurred, and the difficulties you've had implementing this hedgerow and other hedgerows on your property. If you could speak about that and maybe things you've learned and things you might avoid in the future.
Yeah, the biggest challenge with the hedgerows that we implemented this year, the biggest challenge for us was, I would say, not even a major challenge, but when we did go through our application process, our initial application was denied. And the reason for that is nothing to do with the plan that we came up with and what we were planning to implement. It all had to do with just some technicalities in the website of where we were, specifically the geolocation of our hedgerow. And we wound up in our application, which has an online tool where you can actually pinpoint where you're going to place your hedgerow. We wound up crossing over a property border line. And it was on the map and the geolocations weren't quite aligned with property lines perfectly, and it's very fine difference. But we crossed over that property line in our application, and that resulted in a denial of the initial application. So we had to reapply. Not a big deal. It ultimately got approved. So it was just an extra step and some nervousness as to whether it would be approved after we had that initial denial. But outside of that, the process was very good. The coordinator that we're working with at the CDFA has been very helpful answering our questions throughout the process. There's set timelines that you have to do your implementation by. We're coming up on the deadline is June 30th for our first year in this 3-year cycle, and we wound up getting our plants planted here at the beginning of June. So we are getting close to the deadline. May not be the ideal time from the perspective of California weather cycles to plant, but we've had a very cool spring, and I think these plants are going to do well. They're set up with irrigation lines and mulch, and they should really be off to a good start and thrive. So if it was a hotter spring, it may be more beneficial to have planted those earlier in the year, but I think we'll be fine this year. It was, to me, a very smooth process. Funding wise, I'm expecting that we'll have had close to 90% of our costs covered, both, for what we've incurred in acquiring the plants and spreading the mulch, putting out the irrigation lines, getting the plants planted. I thought that the amounts that the program is funding were pretty much spot on with what we were incurring. And you can plan with different plant sizes, and whether you're getting a 5-gallon pot, or some of our trees were 15-gallon, which are bigger and obviously more expensive. We had some plants that were 1 gallon, and just being able to mix that up and not having strict requirements over it has to be this pot size, that gave us the flexibility to work with the budget that we had to be able to implement within budget. And be able to work with, we have some laborers that we work with that have helped us plant the plants in a short amount of time, so they wouldn't be stressed from the time that we got them to the time we planted them. To me, this, working through this process, very smooth. There's a big window of time for us to plant, and we were able to fit it in with our own schedule on our farm and what worked for us. We came up on the deadline, but getting pretty close, but it worked, and the plants should be successful. They should be off to a good start.
Excellent. Well, I suppose now, just to wrap it up, what advice would you give to other farmers who are considering planting hedgerows? And if you could tell other orchard managers or farm managers in your area about hedgerows, what would you want to tell them about this process, or getting one in, or what would you say?
My number one recommendation would be, don't hesitate, get on it. The sooner you plant those plants, the faster they'll grow into a full-size hedgerow, and you'll get the benefits of it. Not just a win for the farm, which there are a lot of benefits to the farm that have been well documented, but a benefit to the planet. And it's anytime you can have a win-win situation like that and be able to work with a government program that's very supportive and very helpful in the process, as opposed to being restrictive and making it difficult. I mean, it can't get any better than that. So I say, to the extent you have the opportunity, don't hesitate, just do it. That would be my biggest recommendation. Find ways to bring diversity, but even if you don't want to, even if you're just focused on 1 or 2 species, that's beneficial too, of plants that you want to put in your hedgerow. So, you just do it.
And what would you say to a farmer that had no idea where to start on a project?
There are great resources out there. Nick Filannino, who's interviewing me, I mean, you were helpful working with me, not only, kind of more recently as we were refining our plant selection right before we purchased our plants, when nurseries didn't have exactly the varieties that we were looking for, but when we were working through the application process, you had done some consulting with us, and I found that very helpful. There are resources out there that are very supportive, extremely easy to work with, and will make the process easier for you, other farmers. Take advantage of those resources. It's mutually beneficial, and you'll find the process to be very smooth working with that help.
Cool. Yeah, we'll definitely mention at the end of this interview the available technical assistance providers that are available across the state to help farmers with this program, because there are hundreds of us that can help out.
Something I would add is that Nick had helped me out with also was, as I was trying to figure out numbers of plants, because we did do our hedgerows in 2 different locations, two different lengths with different varieties. As we were trying to figure out, well, just how many plants do we need to buy?
All right.
Yeah, Nick, you were very helpful in helping me figure that out, even down to the by species, by plant variety level of, all right, this is exactly how many we need, and that made it so easy for me just to reach out to the nurseries and make the purchases that I need to make to get the plants out here.
And how long are the hedgerows you put in during this round again?
There's one is just under 300 feet. It's about 280 feet. And the other is almost 350 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Any final words?
And we're excited to see these grow. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Peter Serventi, Serventi Ranch.